we've gotten through a couple different, and you might be thinking, well, all I can really do is make a circle and different sizes of rectangles. And of course there's more to SVG. There are other types of elements that we can build in, that we can add, that we can play with. But even with what we know so far, we can already make things with just the shapes that we have. You just have to think about things a little differently. The rectangle, the special rectangle, that's a square, and the circle alone will be enough to already make some things. The moon, which is, well, in our case, it's going to be a crescent. Of course, if it's a full moon, it's just a circle. So that's pretty easy. But then it might as well just be the sun. Now, depending on the phase, it also could just be a half circle. But we're going to do the crescent because it's pretty iconic. So you might be wondering how. Well, we haven't talked about a crescent element yet, right? So how are we going to make a crescent when all we've talked about are circles and rectangles? Well, even just with the circles, we can make the crescent. So if we take a yellow circle, assuming you want your moon to be yellow, and then you take a white circle, and you put the white circle on top of the yellow circle, but not completely, where there's still a bit of a gap, we'll have a crescent. So that's what we're going to do. Open your plain text editor, text edit, notepad, code editor like brackets, no word, no wordpad, no pages. So I'm going to go into my launch pad, and I'm going to find text edit. There it is. And we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll start with our HTML tags. So the opening tag and the closing tag for HTML. A little bit of white space to make things a little bit easier to read. We'll open the body tag. We'll close the body tag. And then we can start our SVG code. Alright, so what's going to go in here? Well, to start with, let's put a comment because you should. We are going to make a moon. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Using a couple overlapping circles. Alright. So we have our base comment. I'm going to add one more. First circle. First circle will be yellow. 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so let's make our circle. So circle, and the CX can be, I don't know, it doesn't really matter as long as it's far enough away from the edge so that the circle isn't cut off. So I'm going to use 100. And then we need the radius of the circle, which, let's make the moon maybe 30 radius, so that will be 60 total. And then we need the fill, and that will be, let's see, so what was the code for yellow? So RGB, so we know if we add red and green together, that will give us yellow. So red is the first two, so let's do as much red as possible, FF, and let's do as much green as possible, FF, and then 0, 0, because no blue. Slash to close the tag with the right angle bracket, and let's see if it works. Alright, saving. So Command S to save, and we'll call this moon.html. Here it is. Open with Firefox. It's a little bit smaller than I wanted, but I haven't zoomed in yet. Okay, there we go. So that's pretty good. It's fine. Alright, so now I need to cut out the center part, right? Well, not the center, but a chunk out of the right side, so that way it's actually a crescent. So to do this, we are going to add another circle in. Let's add our comments. A white circle on top to cut out the middle of the moon. Add a little space just to make it easier to read so we don't end up with a big mess. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And now we can add our white circle. So CX, and it needs to be over a little bit because it's not going to be right in the middle of it. It's going to be on the edge of it, right? So CX equals maybe 120, and CY equals maybe, well, we're just gonna go with 100 for right now because I'm just moving it over. I don't really want to mess with moving it up right now. And let's make the radius a little bit smaller, maybe like 20. And then our fill will be white. So to make it white, we have to add all the colors together. Olive red, olive green, and olive blue. So that's FF, FF, FF. Close the double quotes, slash, and right angle bracket to close the tag. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, that's further over than I wanted, but that's okay. Go back here and I can tweak that a bit. Maybe 110 for the center X value. And we can refresh it. Ooh, almost. Almost. That's almost where I want it. Let's try 115. There we go. That's pretty much what I want. I'm okay with that. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that this yellow on this white background is a little hard to see. It would be nice if I could add an outline to this, wouldn't it? So I could do it the hard way, and I could try to put a darker circle behind the moon, but I don't have to do it that way. There's actually an attribute that will do it for me. So we've already talked about some attributes. On these circles, we have the center X as an attribute, we have the center Y as an attribute, we have radius as an attribute, and we have fill as an attribute. There's another attribute that we haven't talked about yet called stroke. We just type stroke and equals, and inside of double quotes, we will put the color code. To make it really easy to see, I want to outline mine in black. If white is all the colors, then black is none of the colors, right? To get black on our computer screens, there's actually pretty much no light being emitted. Depending on the type of screen you own, there might be a little bit, but conceptually the idea is that no light is being emitted. So to do that, all of them are going to be 0. So no red, no green, and no blue. So now if we save this and we reopen Firefox and we refresh, now we have a black outline. Now it's a little weird that there's an outline only on one side of the moon. What about this side of the moon? The reason why that's happening is we don't have a cutout of the moon. We have a white circle on top of this yellow circle. So if we want this to be outlined, then we need to outline the white circle that's hovering above the yellow circle. So we're going to go back to our code. We're going to add a stroke on our white circle. So stroke equals, and then in double quotes, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Command S and refresh. Now we have both sides of the moon outlined. The only problem, though, is that we also have this little bit here. To get rid of that, I'm basically going to have to overlap another circle on top of it. So I'm going to add some new lines. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to add another comment. Adding a second white circle to get rid of extra outline. That works. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Circle. CX. I'm just going to guess. I'm going to say maybe 130. And CY equals 100. Keep that the same. And we're going to keep the radius the same as 20. And we need the fill, right? So that's going to be white once again. FF, FF, FF. And then we don't want a stroke, right? So no stroke, so we can just leave that part out. Then slash right angle bracket to close it. So if I do Command S, I can go back here and I can refresh. And actually, that was a pretty good guess. Part of the tips of the crescent are cut off a little bit, and I don't quite like that. So I'm going to move this over maybe just one spot, 131, and try it, refresh. Yeah, that's pretty good. I think I'm content with that. I'm fine with that. There we go. So there's our moon. What if we actually do want this on a background? So maybe like a night sky, right? So I'm just going to make a big, gigantic blue rectangle. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And this giant blue rectangle will represent the sky. Night sky made with a giant blue rectangle. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that will be rect. And, you know, I don't even need an X and Y value because I want it to start at the top left. And by default it will. But I do need a height, which let's do 300. And I need a width, and let's maybe do 400. And we need the fill, which I want to be a dark blue. So RGB, so blue would be the last two characters. So I'm going to leave the first ones off, so 0, 0, 0, 0. And I want a low value. I don't want a really bright blue. I want like a dark blue. So maybe like 55. And then we can close this elements. Command S to save it. And let's see what happens. Alright, well, I'm happy with the blue. The problem is my moon is gone. So why did that happen? So when we're looking at our code and when we read our code, where do we start? Well, if I gave you this and told you to read this, you would start probably up here and you'd see this tag, and then you'd see this tag, and then this tag, and then you'd read across this line, right? And when you finish that line, you'd read across this line, and then you'd go down to the next line, blank, now down to the next line, across, down to the next line, across. The computer does the same thing. So what it did was it drew a yellow circle, and then it drew a white circle on top of that, and then it drew a white circle on top of that, and then it drew a big blue rectangle on top of all of that, because that's the order I put this in. So whatever I put first is going to happen first, and it's going to put the other things right on top. So if I want this to be behind everything else, then it needs to be before everything else. So I'm just going to highlight all of it, and Command X for cuts, Control X if you're on a PC, and let's put it up here. So Command S, and let's refresh and check it out. Alright, there we go. But I don't need those white circles to be white anymore. I need them to be blue. So then I need to change the color code of my white circle. So here's a white circle, and here's my other white circle, and I want to change the color of them. So if we find the fill attribute, here it is. We can change this to that same blue as my night sky, so 0, 0, 0, 0, 5, 5. And here's the fill attribute of the next white circle, so 0, 0, 0, 0, 5, 5. Command S, and refresh. There we go. Now, I told my night sky to be pretty big. And if my moon is only at CY, but I told my night sky to be 300, there should be a lot more night sky down here. And that's because I told my night sky to be bigger than the actual default size of the SVG. I could change that, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So if I want my moon to be higher up in my night sky, then I would need to change the CY value, and I need to change it for the circles that are on top as well, which are now dark blue. So as always, you can take this further if you'd like. Could you add little stars into the sky? Now granted, we've only used circles and rectangles, but you could just use little bitty circles, right, to represent stars. What about clouds? Could you build clouds out of circles? Instead of a night sky, could you make an afternoon sky with maybe a sun and some clouds? And using some of those same techniques, could you make a smiley? So if we look at the smiley here, we have a circle with two circles on top of it, and then a crescent type shape-ish, or a semicircle for the mouth. So how could you make that? Using some of those same ideas that we used to make the moon. In the next video, we'll make something a little more sophisticated.